This HOA ruled with fear for years, but they underestimated one man, and that mistake burned everything down. It started with fire, and a warning no one took seriously. It started with fire, not the kind that warms a home or brings people together, but the kind that forces the truth into the open. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the quiet, picture-perfect suburban neighborhood of Maple Grove Estates was ripped awake by chaos. A violent orange glow tore through the darkness as flames climbed the side of the HOA clubhouse. The same building where fines were issued, rules were enforced, and residents were constantly reminded who was in control. Sirens echoed through streets that were usually silent at night, streets better known for clipboard inspections, lawn measuring arguments, and passive-aggressive warning letters than real danger. Families poured out of their homes in pajamas, staring in disbelief. As firefighters battled the blaze, smoke rolled through the air, thick and bitter, carrying the smell of burning wood and something far worse: fear. The neighborhood's carefully crafted perfection began to melt away. White fences blackened with soot. Decorative shrubs burned to ash. The illusion of order collapsed in real time. Then investigators made a chilling discovery. Every security camera around the clubhouse, cameras that never seemed to miss a resident breaking a rule, was suddenly offline, disabled, silent. And across the scorched brick wall, spray-painted in bold, angry letters, was a message no one could ignore. "You should have left me alone." The word sent a wave of unease through the crowd. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't vandalism. This was personal. Within hours, flashing news vans replaced fire trucks. Reporters spoke into cameras about possible arson and a shocking act of violence in a quiet community. Social media erupted with speculation, rumors, and fear. Neighbors whispered in clusters, trying to guess who could possibly hate the HOA enough to do this. But beneath the smoke, beneath the sirens, and beneath the panic, a darker truth began to surface. This fire wasn't random. It wasn't reckless. It was a warning. And someone in Maple Grove Estates had been pushed too far, someone who had finally decided that silence was no longer an option. The flames were out, but the nightmare was just beginning. The HOA that ruled with fear Maple Grove Estates wasn't just an HOA. It was a suburban dictatorship wrapped in white fences and polite smiles. On the surface, everything looked perfect. Manicured lawns, matching mailboxes, identical houses lined up like soldiers. But behind the scenes, fear ruled the neighborhood. Residents were fined for the smallest mistakes. Trash cans left out 5 minutes past the approved time. Grass measured with rulers and photographed as evidence. Cars towed in the middle of the night for parking just inches out of alignment. Even children were scolded for riding bikes too loudly after sunset. Families learned quickly, don't argue. Those who did were punished harder. At the center of it all was the HOA board. 5 power-hungry neighbors who treated the rulebook like a weapon. They held closed-door meetings, sent threatening letters filled with legal language most residents didn't understand. And every violation came with a fine that seemed to grow larger each time. They claimed it was about community standards. They said the rules protected property values, but everyone in Maple Grove knew the truth. The HOA didn't want order, they wanted control. And then there was Ethan Cole. Ethan didn't stand out. He was quiet, polite, always respectful. His lawn was flawless. His house spotless. He followed every rule to the letter, hoping to be left alone. Instead, he became their favorite target. First came the warnings, then the fines. He was cited for having unapproved curtains visible through his own windows, threatened with penalties for excessive porch use, even though he sat outside no more than any other neighbor. Each notice felt less like enforcement and more like harassment. The breaking point came during a public HOA meeting. In front of the entire neighborhood, the board mocked him, laughed at his complaints. One member smirked and suggested that people like Ethan always think they're smarter than the rules. The room went silent. Ethan didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten anyone. He simply nodded, gathered his papers, and walked out. What the HOA didn't realize, what they never bothered to check, was who Ethan really was. They saw a quiet homeowner. They mistook silence for weakness, and that mistake would cost them everything. The man they thought was Ethan. Cole wasn't just another homeowner, that's what the HOA believed, and that belief would become their greatest mistake. On the surface, Ethan lived like any other resident of Maple Grove Estates. He drove an old, reliable car. He waved politely to neighbors. He paid his dues on time and kept his head down. There was nothing flashy about him, nothing that suggested power or influence. But beneath that quiet routine was a past the HOA never bothered to investigate. Years earlier, Ethan Cole had served as a federal judge, a man who spent decades interpreting the law, questioning motives, and dismantling lies piece by piece. His career ended early after he exposed corruption linked to powerful real estate interests, people with money, lawyers, and political connections. Officially, it was called early retirement. Unofficially, it was exile. When Ethan moved into Maple Grove, he wasn't looking for conflict. He wanted peace. Silence. A life without courtrooms, politics, or power games. Just quiet mornings and evenings on his porch. Instead, the HOA came for him. They sent formal notices, filled with legal threats. They placed liens on his home over minor disputes. Letters arrived weekly, each one more aggressive than the last. At hearings, board members talked over him, rolled their eyes, and treated him like an annoyance rather than a resident. One board member leaned back in his chair during a meeting, smirked, and said words Ethan would never forget. People like, "You always fold." The room laughed. Ethan didn't. He listened. He observed. And most importantly, he remembered. Because judges don't forget how power works. They don't forget procedure. And they don't forget injustice. Every letter was archived. Every fine documented. Every threat recorded. While the HOA believed they were breaking him down, Ethan was doing what he had always done best. Building a case. They thought he was weak because he didn't fight back. They thought silence meant surrender. But silence, for a man who knows the law, is often preparation. And while the HOA tightened its grip, confident that Ethan would eventually break, they failed to see the truth standing right in front of them. They weren't dealing with a victim. They were dealing with a man who knew exactly how systems fall apart, from the inside. The fire that unraveled everything. The arson investigation uncovered something far more explosive than gasoline. At first, officials believed the fire was a simple act of vandalism, anger, taken too far. But as investigators dug deeper, the story began to twist in a direction no one expected. What they found didn't just explain the fire, it exposed a criminal operation hiding behind HOA bylaws. Security footage recovered from nearby homes revealed something shocking. Weeks before the fire, members of the HOA board were seen tampering with the clubhouse cameras. Lenses were adjusted, power cables disconnected, blind spots carefully created. The same cameras that never missed a resident's mistake had suddenly failed when it mattered most. Then the financial audits began. Accountants discovered years of embezzlement buried under fake invoices and maintenance fees. Illegal fines were quietly funneled into personal accounts. Towing companies paid kickbacks for every car they hauled away. Contractors overcharged for repairs that never happened. The HOA wasn't enforcing rules. It was running a business built on fear. And then came the twist. Ethan Cole didn't set the fire. He predicted it. Months earlier, Ethan had filed sealed reports with state authorities detailing everything the HOA was doing. Every illegal fine, every abuse of power, every financial discrepancy. In those reports, he included a warning, one that now felt chillingly accurate. He wrote that escalating pressure, unchecked authority, and internal panic would lead to uncontrollable consequences. The fire wasn't revenge. It was desperation. Investigators discovered that one HOA board member had panicked when audits were rumored to be coming. In a reckless attempt to destroy financial records stored in the clubhouse, he lit the fire, never realizing that everything had already been copied because Ethan had planned ahead. Every document, every email, every receipt, duplicated, archived, protected. When the case finally went to court, Ethan stepped forward, not as a broken homeowner, but as a legal strategist, calm, precise, ruthless with facts. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He simply presented the truth. The HOA board collapsed under the weight of their own crimes. One by one, they turned on each other. Charges followed. Arrests were made. Properties were seized, and Maple Grove Estates, once ruled by fear, was left standing in stunned silence. The fire was out, but everything it touched was changed forever. The silent revenge that shook suburbia Ethan never celebrated. There were no victory speeches, no interviews, no statements to the press. While news cameras crowded the courthouse steps and reporters searched for reactions, Ethan quietly walked away, just as he always had. When the trial ended, he packed his belongings and left Maple Grove Estates without fanfare. No goodbye party. No farewell letter. By the time most residents realized he was gone, his house was already empty. Behind him, everything had changed. The HOA was officially dissolved. The fines that once drained families' savings were erased. Liens were lifted. Residents who had lived in fear for years finally breathed freely. For the first time, children played without being watched, and neighbors spoke openly without worrying about punishment. The impact didn't stop there. State lawmakers took notice. New proposals were introduced. Laws designed to limit HOA power, increase transparency, and protect homeowners from abuse. Maple Grove Estates became a case study, cited in hearings and legal discussions as a warning of what happens when authority goes unchecked. Ethan's name was rarely mentioned in public. But inside the neighborhood, people remembered. They talked about the man who never yelled, never threatened, never broke a rule. They remembered how he endured the fines, the letters, the humiliation, without ever losing control. How he listened while others laughed. How he watched while others underestimated him. He didn't fight loudly. He waited. Because real power doesn't scream. It documents. It prepares. And when the moment comes, it lets the truth burn everything down. Years later, new families moved into Maple Grove Estates, unaware of the nightmare that once ruled the streets. The fences were repainted, the clubhouse rebuilt. But the story remained, passed quietly from neighbor to neighbor like a cautionary tale. So the next time someone underestimates the quiet neighbor, the one who keeps records, asks questions, and says very little, remember Maple Grove Estates. And remember this: the most dangerous people aren't the loudest. They're the ones who understand the rules and know exactly when to use them. If this story made you think twice about power, silence, and patience, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. More true stories like this are coming, and you won't want to miss them.